Have you ever felt that there's more to life, more to reality, or even to yourself than the story you've been told since you were born, from your parents, from the school system, from TV, or from society in general? You've been living your life based on what you've heard of what it means to be human, what we're capable of doing as human beings, what's possible, what's not possible, but deep inside you still feel there is something missing. But what were you before the world told you who you were? We've got a lot to talk about. Hello everyone, this is Kevlan, and in today's video I wanted to talk about authenticity. I wanted to talk about what it means to be true to yourself and why a lot of people have been mentioning authenticity as being the highest state of being we can achieve as human beings. So to me, when I look at what it means to be authentic, what is authenticity to me? Authenticity to me is really going back to the foundation of who we are, before the world told me who I am, like who I'm truly am beneath all the layers that I've been building years after years based on the story I've been told. Who I am, if beneath all of this, by reconnecting to that little spark within. And the best way I can describe it is, I don't know if you have kids, but kids are great teachers and they can really show us what it means to be authentic. Especially when you look at kids, especially like small kids, little kids between, 3, 4 to 8, 9 years old, and you look at them and how they live their life. They're in the present, they have this spark within. And I remember one time I was at the playground, and my daughter is 7, and I was at the playground and I was just watching her playing with other kids. And then on one hand, that was all the kids playing in the playground, being in the moment, very happy, very joyful, being a little bit silly and very imaginative and really carefree. And then on the other hand, I was looking at the parents watching their kids, and that was quite the opposite. The parents were like, it felt like the spark that the kids had disappeared. And then I was starting to question, but what happened? What happened between when we come into this world with this carefree mindset, with little spark, with presence and this authenticity, and then 20, 30 years later, when you look at ourselves, we look at the majority of the parents, they lost the spark, they are careful, they are full of fear, and they're no longer themselves. What happened? And that's really when it started for me to question what it means to be authentic, what it means to truly connect to yourself. I do believe that when we come into this world, we all have a purpose, and everything, as I said, everything carries a purpose in this universe, in this reality, the seen and the unseen. Everything carries a purpose, whether it's a plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, human kingdom. Everything carries a specific purpose for the balance of the whole. And yet, when we come and incarnate into this world, we are told a story. We are told a story about what it means to be human. We are told a story that what we need to do to have a successful life. We are told a story that it's all about survival, that life appears randomly, there is this randomness about life, there is this luck about life, and as a result there is no really higher purpose to be human, but just to survive, survival of the fittest. And all of this story that we've been told is obviously transferred from generations to generations by the parents, by the school system, by TV, by society in general. And little by little, we believe in this story. We believe that there is nothing deeper, there is nothing greater, and we're just going to merely exist anymore. We're not going to live anymore. We're going to lose this spark. We're going to lose our connections with our true self, with our authenticity, because we feel that we need to survive. We need to protect ourselves. So we need to start people pleasing. We need to start following the crowd. We want to fit in, so we have to tendency to suppress and repress our truth, or whatever we have in mind, or even our own emotions, what we think is good or what is not good. Sometimes we have a bad emotions and we feel it's not good to feel that emotion, so we have a tendency to repress it. And over time, it's going to build this whole persona. It's going to build this whole avatar, or this whole mask, as I like to say it, based on all of this accumulation of traumas, of fears, of belief system that we have about ourselves, about the world we live in, about the life that we have, that we need to survive, And all those unconscious patterns that little by little we are picking up and programming our mind, or the society or the world is programming our mind based on the story we've been told. So it's not surprising that when we start looking at the parents and the adult in general, that we lost our spark, we lost this connection that we have with our true authenticity or true self within, and that's why I said initially, what were you before the world told you who you were? And the best way is really to look at kids, look at them, look at the spark that they have. And little by little, over the years, they start to lose that spark by believing in the story that we're teaching them, by believing in the story that we are programming them with. And then based on all of this, they're going to be like behaving like everybody else and following the crowd. And then, we need to be in that standard. If you do this, you're normal. If you do this, you're weird. So everybody will have a tendency to follow what is normal, because nobody wants to feel weird. Nobody wants to feel rejected. Nobody wants to feel abandoned. Because again, we are in the survival mindset. We lost what we truly are beneath all those different layers. And yet I do believe that there is a way to go back to that state, because how can we truly live when we're not ourselves? We merely exist. Someone said one day, we're born and we die at 18 years old, and then we are buried at 75. It's because between 18 and 75 we don't live anymore. We just exist, and we don't have this happiness within. We lost our fulfillment, we lost this purpose. Because again, I do believe that every human being carries a specific purpose. But how can you connect with your specific purpose if you disconnect yourself from who you really are before the world tells you who you are? And that's, to me, when we can really reconnect with this happiness within. And that's why a lot of people have been saying authenticity is the highest state of being we can achieve, because when we go back to authenticity, we go back to who we are before the world tells us who we are. We go back to that spark within. We reconnect with our soul. We align ourselves with our soul and our purpose, because I do believe that before coming into this realm, before coming into this 3D reality, we all carry a purpose, but this purpose get buried beneath all the different layers we're going to build over time by believing in the story we've been told. And the only way to find this fulfillment, to find this true happiness, because again, happiness, even if society has been telling us we have to look externally, we have to do things, we have to buy things, we have to follow certain paths to be happy. True happiness can only be experienced when we start to become true to ourselves. And I've experienced it. That's been the story of my life, and especially over the last 5 years, for a very long time, like the majority of us. I've been living my life based on the story I've been taught about myself, based on the story I've been taught about what it means to be human, based on the story I've been taught about what is life and what we need to do with our life. Until it was enough for me, because I lost myself, and when you lose yourself, you lose your fulfillment, you lose your purpose, you lose your spark, you lose your joy and your inner happiness. And then I decided to come back to who I really am, to remember that I was not this story, to remember that I was not the belief that I had about myself. I was not the fear that I had about myself. I was not the trauma, the trapped emotion that I had about myself, because all of this was created based on the story I've been told. But there is much more beneath all of this. And I decided to start a journey to become, to come back to myself, to go back home to myself. And I've experienced a few times. And the experience of being home, being truly aligned with your soul. And once you experience it, you will know exactly what I mean by that, because I can't describe that feeling. This feeling is really obviously an inner peace, but it's feeling whole. It's like when I experienced it, the first thought that I had was, I am home. That's the first thought that I had is, I am home. And in that moment, I didn't want anything. I didn't need anything. I was not thinking about anything. I was just so happy to be home, so whole to be home, that I was just enjoying it. And that's what I mean by authenticity, is because when we're authentic, we go back to, we align ourselves, we first remember who we are, we align ourselves with our soul, we align ourselves with what we are beneath all the layers, beneath all the story we've been taught about ourselves, about the world has been telling us about ourselves. And when we are able to reconnect with who we really are, then we reconnect with our true purpose, we reconnect with our true missions, and we reconnect with why we're here. And we reconnect with that spark within, with that excitement, with that presence, with that, with life, and we start living, because we're here to experience life, we're here to grow, we're here to learn, we're here to, to align ourselves and to stay in alignment with our soul. And I do believe that everybody has a choice right now. We all have a choice to live based on the story we've been told, to continue to live, or to exist, as I like to say it, for the rest of your life. Or you have a choice to go back and try to find yourself and remember who you are, remember that you're not that story, and try to reconnect, face all the story, all the fears, all the belief, all the trauma, all the emotion that are preventing you from, or that have been building on top of who you really are, so that you can start accessing little by little who you really are. You can start reconnecting with who you really are, and you can start accessing your greatest version, and as a result, your greatest life. So now the choice starts with awareness. That's really the first step of transformation. And it's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering that you're not the story you've been told. And it all starts with awareness. What thoughts, what beliefs, what fear do you have right now that are preventing you from being who you really are beneath all these layers that you've been building, all of this persona that you've been building that you're not? So this is where it starts. It starts with increasing your awareness. It start with being more mindful about who you are. It starts about with knowing thyself. Know thyself. Know thyself is all about facing all the things that are preventing you from becoming and aligning yourself, and remembering that your authentic self, your true self. So that's really where it starts. Self-awareness is the first step. And starting to live your life no longer as the actor, as a person absorbed by the movie and reacting and forcing and surviving and following, but taking back, detaching yourself. And when we say detaching, and I know a lot of people say if you detach yourself, then it means you don't live anymore, or you don't want to live. It's not about this. It's about detaching yourself from that story, for all the story, or the story you've been told about yourself, and starting to be the watcher, starting to live your life as the observer, starting to raise your consciousness level, your awareness, your self-awareness level about who you are and why you have the life you're currently experiencing now. So this is where it's all starts. It starts with awareness. It starts with increasing your level of consciousness. It starts with becoming more mindful about what, all of these stories, so that you can release it, you can face it and release it, and reconnect more and more with the person you are beneath all of this. So now I would like to finish this video by asking you a question, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts or to hear your answers in comments down below. So who are you, or who were you before the world told you who you were? If you had to remove all the expectations and the roles and the titles and the mask you've learned to wear, who would you be? And I'm curious to hear that. If this content resonates with you, please subscribe to my channel. Like the video down below. You always help with the algorithm. Also comment your answers and your response to that question that I asked you before. I would love to hear your thoughts. Also, if you don't know, if you would like to reconnect with yourself, if you would like to reconnect with your authentic self, but you don't know where to start, there is a link down below in the description of my self-awareness starter guide. You can download it for free, and it will give you some initiation. It will give you some information about where to start to actually reconnect with your authentic self and start a journey back to yourself. In the meantime, stay true, stay authentic, and I'll see you in the next video.